Hi Eli, hi Vinny. Okay, Grandma's gonna do Wind in the Willows again. We're gonna start on chapter 2, middle of chapter 2. All right, I remember it was right here. See, here's the horse. Okay. Late in the evening, tired and happy, and miles from home, they drew up on a remote common far from habitations, turned the horse loose to graze, and ate their simple supper sitting on the grass by the side of the cart. Toad talked big about all that was going to do in the days to come, while stars grew fuller and larger all around them, and a yellow moon, appearing suddenly and silently from nowhere in particular, came to keep them company and listen to their talk. At last they turned into little bunks in the cart, and Toad, kicking out his legs sleepily, said, "Well, good night, you fellows. This is a real life for a gentleman. Talk about your old river." "I don't talk about my river," replied the patient rat. "You know I don't, Toad, but I think about it," he added, pathetically in a lower tone. "I think about it all the time." The mole reached from under his blanket, felt for the rat's paw in the darkness, and gave it a squeeze. "I'll do whatever you like, Ratty," he whispered. "Shall we run away tomorrow morning, quite early, very early, and go back to the dear old hole in the river?" No, we'll see it out," whispered back the rat. "Thankfully, awfully, but I hope to stick by Toad."
Call from Franklin MD.
We don't want that, do we? Okay, let's start over. No, we'll see to it," whispered the rat. "Thanks awfully, but I ought to stick with Toad till this trip is ended. It wouldn't be safe for him to be left to himself. It wouldn't take very long. His fads never go. Good night." The end was indeed nearer than ever the rat suspected. After so much open air and excitement, the Toad slept very soundly, and no amount of shaking could rouse him out of bed the next morning. So the mole and rat turned to, quickly and manfully, and while the rat saw to the horse, and lit the fire, and cleaned last night's cups and platters, and got things ready for breakfast, the mole trudged off to the nearest village, a long way off, for milk and eggs and various necessities. The Toad had, of course, forgotten to provide. The hard work had been done, and the two animals were resting, thoroughly exhausted by the time Toad appeared on the scene, fresh and gay. Remarkably, with a pleasant, easy life it was they all were leading now, after the cares and worries and fatigues of housekeeping are at home. They had a pleasant ramble that day over grassy downs and along narrow by-lanes, and camped, as before, on a common, only this time the two guests took care of Toad. They told him to do his fair share of work. In consequence, when the time came for starting next morning, Toad was by no means so rapturous about the simplicity of the primitive life, and indeed attempted to resume his place in his bunk, whence he had hauled by force. Their way lay, as before, across country by narrow lanes, and it was not till the afternoon that they came out of the high road, their first high road. And there disaster, fleet and unforeseen, sprang out on them. Disaster momentous indeed to their expedition, but simply overwhelming in its effect on the after career of Toad. They were strolling along the high road easily, the mole by the horse's head, talking to him, since the horse had complained that he was being frightfully left out of it, and nobody considered him in the least, and Toad and the water rat walking behind the cart, talking together. At least Toad was talking, and Rat was saying at intervals, "Yes, precisely," and "What did you say to him?" and thinking all the time of something very different, when far behind them they heard a faint warning hum, like the drone of a distant bee. Glancing back, they saw a small cloud of dust, with a dark center of energy, advancing on them at incredible speed, while from out of the dust a faint pop, pop, wailed like an uneasy animal in pain. Hardly regarding it, they turned to resume their conversation, when in an instant, as it seemed, the peaceful scene had changed, and with a blast of wind, and a whirl of sound that made them jump from the nearest ditch. It was on them. The pop, pop rang with a brazen shout in their ears. They had a moment's glimpse of the interior of glittering plate glass and rich morocco, and a magnificent motor car commenced. Breath-snatching, passionate, with its pilot tense and hugging his wheel, possessed all earth and air for the fraction of a second, flung an enveloping cloud of dust that blinded and enwrapped them utterly, and then dwindled to a speck in the far distance, changed back into a droning bee once more. The old gray horse, dreaming as he plodded along on his quiet paddock in a new raw situation such as this, simply abandoned himself to his natural emotions, rearing, plunging back steadily in spite of all the mole's effort in his head and all the mole's lively language directed at its better feelings. He drove the cart backwards towards the deep ditch at the side of the road. It wavered an instant, and then there was a heart-rending crash, and the canary-colored cart, their pride and joy, lay on its side in the ditch, an irredeemable wreck. Oh no! The rat danced up and down in the road, simply transported with passion. "You villains," he shouted, shaking both fists. "You scoundrels! You highwaymen! You road hogs! I'll have the law on you. I'll report you. I'll take you through the courts." His homesickness had quite slipped away from him, and for the moment he was the skipper of the canary-colored vessel, driven on a shoal by the reckless jockeying of rival mariners, and he was trying to recollect all the fine and biting things he used to say to masters of steam launches when their wash, as they had drove too near to the bank, used to flood his parlor carpet at home. Toad sat straight down in the middle of the dusty road, his legs stretched out before him, and stared fixedly in the direction of the disappearing motor car. He breathed short, his face wore a placid, satisfied expression, and at intervals he faintly murmured, "Pop, pop." The mole was busy trying to quiet the horse, which he succeeded in doing after a time. Then he went to look at the cart on its side in a ditch. It was indeed a sorry sight. Oh no! Here's a good picture, my love. That's what the cart is. Panels and windows smashed, axles hopelessly bent, one wheel off, sardine tins scattered over the wide world, and the bird in this birdcage sobbing pitifully and calling to be let out. The rat came to help him, but their united efforts were not sufficient to right the cart. "Hi, Toad!" they cried. "Come and bear a hand, can't you?" The toad never answered a word or budged from his seat in the road, so they went to see what was the matter with him. They found him in a sort of trance, a happy smile on his face, his eyes still fixed on the dusty wake of their destroyer. At intervals, he was still heard to murmur, "Pop, pop." The rat shook him by the shoulder. "Are you coming to help us, Toad?" he demanded sternly. "Glorious stirring sight," murmured Toad, never offering to move. "The poetry of motion, the real way to travel, the only way to travel. Here today and next week tomorrow. Villages skipped, towns and cities jumped, always somebody else's horizon. Oh bliss, oh pop, pop, oh my, oh my." "Oh, stop being an ass, Toad," cried the mole despairingly. "And to think I never knew," went on the toad in a dreamy monotone, "all those wasted years that lie behind me. I never knew, never even dreamed. But now that I know, now that I'm fully realized, oh, what a flowery track lies spread before me henceforth. What dust clouds shall spring up behind me as I speed on my reckless way? What carts I shall fling carelessly into the ditch in the wake of my magnificent onset? Horrid little carts, common carts, canary-colored carts." Look at, there's Mole talking to the horse. "What are we to do with him?" asked the mole of the water rat. "Nothing at all," replied the rat firmly, "because there's really nothing to be done. You see, I know him from old. He is now possessed. He has got a new craze, and it always takes him that way in the first stage. He'll continue like that for days now, like an animal walking in a happy dream. Quite useless for all the practical purposes. Never mind him. Let's go and see what's there to be done about the cart. A careful inspection showed them even if they succeeded in riding it by themselves, the cart would travel no longer. The axles were in a hopeless state, and the missing wheel was shattered into pieces. The rat knotted the horse's reins over his back and took him by the hand, carrying the birdcage and its hysterical occupant into the other hand. "Come on," he said grimly to the mole. "It's 5 or 6 miles to the nearest town, and we shall just have to walk. The sooner we make a start, the better." "But what about Toad?" asked the mole anxiously, as they set off together. "We can't leave him here, sitting in the middle of the road by himself, in the distracted state he's in. It's not safe. Supposing another thing we were to come along." "Oh, bother, Toad," said the rat savagely.
Call from Stanwist.
Silly. "Oh, bother, Toad," the rat said savagely. "I've done with him." They had not proceeded very far out on their way, however, when there was a pattering of feet behind them, and Toad caught up with them, thrust a paw inside the elbow of each of them, still breathing short and staring into vacancy. He caught up with them, huh? Look at, there they are. I think we'll stop here and we'll start here tomorrow. Okay? Look at, there's all 3 of them. They're gonna walk 5 or 6 miles into town. Love you, sweetheart. Mwah.